Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. In the name of God, most beneficent, most merciful. We ask Allah to extend His mercy and His blessings to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the followers of Prophet Muhammad, as He did extend His blessings and His mercy to Prophet Abraham and the followers of Prophet Abraham alayhi salatu wassalam. Listen, every time the camera comes on and our brother, the director, he says, okay, cue, I'm reading the Quran. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get the information so we can keep our conversation in line with what we're trying to present, which is that Islam works. It works because of the word of Allah, and it works for those who follow the word of Allah. And the Quran is the word of Allah. It has a proven history. I'm not going to go over that right now, but maybe sometime in the future we'll be able to cover it. I was reading some verses here, and I'll just read this very quickly, inshallah. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, bismillahir rahmanir rahim. I seek refuge with God from Satan the accursed. We gave Moses the book and followed him up with a succession of messengers. We gave Jesus, the son of Mary, clear signs and strengthened him with the Holy Spirit. Is it that whenever there comes to you a messenger with what you yourselves do not desire, you are puffed up with pride? Some you call impostors, and others you slay. They say our hearts are the wrappings which preserve Allah's word. We need no more. No, Allah's curse is on them for their blasphemy. Little is it they believe. And when there comes to them a book from Allah, confirming what is with them, although of old they had prayed for victory against those without faith, when there comes to them that which they should have recognized, they refuse to believe in it. But the curse of Allah is on those without faith. I think that, one more verse I'll read. Miserable is the price for which they have sold their souls, in that they deny the revelation which Allah has sent down. An insolent envy that Allah is of His grace should send it to any of His servants He pleases. Thus have they drawn on themselves wrath, the wrath of Almighty Allah. And humiliating is the chastisement of those who reject faith. You think about all the societies in the past who have suffered humiliating punishment. And, there are people in today's world, in the 21st century, who say that, oh, this is old wives' tale. It was just natural phenomenon. It was just an earthquake. It was just a hailstorm. It was just a tornado. It was just a hurricane. Think about it. Think about the societies that were destroyed. Think about the one that's most obvious to us. Pompeii. Think about the fact that Pompeii was actually a place where people went to pleasure. Astaghfirullah al-Azim. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Pleasure. Where men went to go with prostitutes, or men went to go with other men, or women went to go with other women. All this is going on there. Why? Because those people, when they died, were caught in those positions when they died. Oh yeah. They even have instances where people went to be with animals. Oh yeah. Or have animals to go with them. It's happened to an IBM executive about 3 years ago. Look, I'm not talking to you to talk about these things, even though I know that, my language or the things that I'm talking about are unpleasant, but they're real, and they're happening in today's world. Public safety and nutrition. These are two issues that are suffering in today's world. These are issues that are being ignored, and people have taken the things that were given to us as a means of procreation, that is, extending our species, and things that were given to us as a means of rebuilding our energy, increasing our energy, or getting energy, which is the reason we eat. That Allah made it taste pleasant. That's a mercy from Allah. Okay? But, you know, when you start eating potato chips and corn snacks for dinner, and you start eating things that really are not nutritious for you, and you start getting sick, you have to think about it. When you start getting STD, sexually transmitted diseases, because you're going with this woman and that woman, or this man and that man, and so forth and so on. These are all things that God has prohibited. In the Bible, we know that fornication and adultery are prohibited. Even more so in the Quran. The Quran makes it clear. Proper nutrition is stressed in the Quran. I can't say that nutrition is stressed in the Bible. I don't know what the Bible says about nutrition. So we have our brother, Abdullah Barone from California, who, how long have you been a Muslim, Abdullah?
25 years.
25 years.
Yes.
Okay. And you got your master's in public safety, in public health and nutrition,
especially
while you were a Muslim.
Yes.
Okay.
Muslim.
So that means that you had a consciousness towards helping people with this. And you have some grounding in Quran, all right, as far as the way that you're able to present your information. But you also have the Western version of why the field that you've chosen to build up your barakat, your blessings, okay, all right, is incomplete the way they taught it to you. Am I right about this or wrong about this? Okay. Can you take it from there, please?
Okay. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, most merciful. Wa salatu wa salam ala khayri anbiya wa mursaleen Muhammad. And may the peace and blessings of Allah be upon the best of his prophets and messengers Muhammad, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajmaheen, and upon his family and all of his companions. One of the things you mentioned, there's a few things that you mentioned. When I was a new Muslim, I appreciate Islam because you had a criteria. We have references to go and check the correctness of something, or the incorrectness, or the range of maneuverability that we have. I appreciate it, and you could go to a book, you could go to the Quran, or to the authentic narrations of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. So it gave you a range of boundaries to operate in. And whether it was food, whether it was relations, whether it was all those things that we desire. People become hungry, we want to eat, but how much is good and how much is too much? And we have guidance on that. If we want relations, we will seek relations. But in what context is it beneficial as an individual and to the community? And in which situation is it harmful? So that range, I really appreciate it. So when I started public health as a new Muslim, I was learning about public health, appreciated the aspect, how do you ensure health for the population, but I didn't know anything enough about Islam. Didn't know Arabic or anything. And then later I found an opportunity to study Arabic and study about Islam in university here in Riyadh. And so being able to try to understand those together, is something that I appreciate. And the most important thing, if nothing else is remembered, is that there's a criteria to define what health is. There's a range, there's a spectrum of health. There's a spectrum of good. There's a spectrum of bad or evil. And like hues you have. And so navigating through that in life to maximize the benefit, minimize the casualties is the trek of public health from before birth all the way until you die. But in terms of the Islamic perspective, it goes from, it's all in preparation for what comes after death. And navigate us through the journey to get the best outcome. And that's the crust of it. Nutrition is one of those things we do. Relations, when Allah tells us, زُيِّنَ لِلنَّاسِ حُبُّ الشَّهَوَاتِ مِنَ النِّسَاءِ وَالْقَنَاطِيرِ وَقَنْطَرَةً in Surah Al-Imran, that Allah is that it has been beautified to mankind His love for women. and for money, and for being, and for children, and it goes on. So these things are beautified, but the way we achieve it, the methodology we use, ensures whether the outcome is going to be positive for the individual and the community, or whether it's going to be harmful for the individual and the community and all the variations between there. So criteria is the most important thing that would be the stressing point. How do we measure health? What's the reference point? You know, it's not, for example, if my code is the street code, you know, the code of the streets for what's right and wrong and loyalties and enmity, that's a whole different criteria than a code that we follow. Whereas we say if there's a wrong, even if you're the one who did it, you're supposed to acknowledge that wrong, even if it was against your own self.
Okay, you mentioned something there. Can you just stress a little bit more about what you mean when you talk about street?
Oh,
you know,
the poor
some people
places.
may not understand it.
Yeah, okay. And talking about the street, the areas, and usually in big cities where there's low income, meager education, meager opportunities, a lot of desperate people trying to achieve good and not many opportunities, and they do desperate things. And so there's a code in that desperate situation, a lifestyle, and it evolves in different ways in different poor societies.
Okay, I just want to stress and bring out a point here, maybe, and that is that if people are poor, that doesn't mean that they're necessarily criminal.
No.
Okay?
No.
If they become desperate, okay, and they start doing things, that means there's something wrong with the society, and it's unresponsive to their needs. Okay? And since the instinct of the human being is to survive, okay, they're going to do things that within the framework of an uncaring society appears to be okay, as long as you don't get caught. Why? Because sometimes in societies like that, the leaders sometimes cause people who are in desperate situations, well, if he can do it, so can I. Okay?
Yeah.
And this is something that, once again, will affect public health and safety.
I'm glad you brought that up, because you're completely correct. And I stand corrected, is that this code of the streets could be Wall Street, or it could be Compton. But it's a code that somebody's adhering to, and the reference, what's the reference? Is it just their desires, or is there a book of morals or a book of guidance that is supposed to ensure the greater good? And so that's what public health is about. And even if it goes to the aspect of nutrition, how many chips is too much? How much water is not enough? So all of those things are encompassed, and then we have a range of maneuverability, whether we know it or we don't. And so it's not, and it's upon us to seek that information. If we don't know, then ask the people of knowledge. In terms of Islamic affairs,
those who don't know, ask those who know.
Is ask the people of remembrance, the people who've dedicated their life to understanding these things. If it's religious knowledge, you go to the religious scholars. If it's medical, you go to a doctor. If it's a mechanic, you go to a mechanic, an architect. So
now, is there something that says that a religious scholar cannot be an architect, a doctor, a mechanic?
No.
Because there are many religious scholars who are.
You have a whole spectrum, and I think it's just the matter of time that people dedicate, because all of those disciplines, you can have combinations of them. It's whether a person is going to invest that time. From what I understand, like Imam Shafi'i, one of the prominent Islamic scholars one of the early Islamic scholars, he was a physician, and he practiced, he was a scholar in Islam. So it wasn't uncommon for those things to happen. So,
and in mentioning that, one thing we haven't spoken, there's a lot of things we haven't spoken about, but the hospital, the system of hospitals we have in the world today, I remember reading about the early Muslims and the way that they established their healthcare facilities, which was something that was completely unprecedented. All right, the way that the early Muslims established the types of surgery that they did. Muslims were the first to perform certain types of delicate eye surgery. not just in the Arabian countries, but also in places in Africa, from what I understand. It was the Muslim physicians that implemented some of these techniques, all right? But hospitalization, the system of the wards, all right, when you have patients with, say, lung illnesses, and other patients who had illnesses of the eyes, and other patients who had maybe blood circulation problems. I know that they used to have a system of determining illness based on the phlegm, okay? They came up from people. And, you know, this was something, I don't know if this particular system is still used or not, okay? But these things were unprecedented. And it led to, from what I can recall reading, a different, a better, a healthier society. And one of the things about maintaining health in a Muslim society is we're required to pray 5 times a day, all right? We're required to wash when needed prior to each prayer. Some people make 5 prayers, they wash 5 times. There's certain rituals or certain ways that we wash our hands and our arms and so forth and so on. And in utilizing these particular things, it encourages a number of things. It encourages a number of things in the society, including the provision of water, all right, for the purpose of cleaning, all right, and the attempt and I should say the engineering methods used for making this water readily available throughout Muslim societies. A lot of people don't think about these things, but flowing water in Muslim societies is something that came about primarily, I'm thinking to say exclusively, I'll say primarily, as a result of the necessity that we have to pray. But also if you don't feel good, if something hurts you, if you can't see well, if you can't, you have any type of problem or illness, you don't really feel like praying, okay? You'll do it. There are people, I've seen people limping, you know, to the salat and what have you. But if the public health is such that the people are healthy enough and they go out to pray, all right, it doesn't bother them, which is another aspect of public health, all right, which protects the soul. Once the soul is protected, once the nafs is protected, then other things flow from it. You can go to work, because prayer comes, you know, you have to take care of your wife and your children. And the wife has to take care of the husband and the children, and so forth and so on. So all these things kind of tie in together, all right? And it makes for societies that are stable for hundreds of years, And modernization is not something that you introduce into a society that disrupts that stabilization or that sakina, that stability. Public health?
Yes. First of all, I wouldn't profess to know the history of hospitals. I know that there's a really nice book. I read some of what you mentioned, 1001 Inventions in the Muslim World, that was printed and was compiled and funded by Abdul Latif Jamil. And it gives a broad history in terms of health, nutrition, engineering, mathematics, a whole range of issues. And that's one of the things they brought about the hospitals. What I would say about the developments that Islam and the Muslims took to a higher level is that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, he taught us to, Bellig anni walaw ayat, is that convey upon me even if it's just a verse. وَحَدَّثَ أَهْلُ الْكِتَابِ وَلَا حَرَجْ, is that, and speak or narrate on the aspects of the people of the book, and there's no harm. Now, this qualified because we don't build legislation off of what the people of the book narrate in terms of stories about what happened before, but as an information, given some context of it. So the context is kind of set by taking from some of their traditions and understand what did they say about past events, but it's not built on legislation. We don't make our legislation based on that. I'm saying that because just like the message of the Prophet ﷺ is a continuation of that which came before. The knowledge of medicine, the knowledge of nutrition, the knowledge of ensuring public health in the most general, broadest way is a compilation. And so the Muslims who advanced medicine, they did translate some of the books of the Greeks. They translated books of other people in mathematics and such, and they took it to the next level.
Next level. Okay.
They built upon it, and there was nothing to prevent them from doing it, as long as it didn't conflict with the basis of the preserving the religion and their understanding and their soul.
Okay. Once again, what we're looking at here is, the way that history has shown what we call Sirah, that Muslims, when utilizing what Allah has told us in the Quran, as far as eating is concerned, about the way we should respect one another and our non-Muslim neighbors, okay? But at the same time, to show concern for the society in such a way as that we're encouraged to spend from our private wealth in ways that make it comfortable for the people who live there, okay? And once we do these things, history has shown that Muslim societies have always produced the greatest amount of stability for the people that were there, and gave the people hope for, it took away that anxiety of, where's my next meal coming from? Even today, there are societies in Muslim communities. I remember just recently, about 2 or 3 days ago, hearing about one in India that feeds some 1,500 people a day, Muslims and non-Muslims. And this is something that's promoted by the businessmen there, all right? Completely separate of any government interference. And one of the things is that we have to keep in mind is that this type of behavior leads to stability in a society, whether it's a Muslim society or not. And that's one of the reasons that we say Islam works.